Good Tevach, Shavua Tov. Want to tell the story of the Baal Shem Tov and try to answer in brief the question I received in my page as of who was the Baal Shem Tov. I have the book Shibchei Baal Shem Tov, Shibchei Abesht, which is the earliest written and earliest published work on the Baal Shem Tov, written by a student of the Baal Shem Tov who later became Rav in our community, and it's probably the closest of a, not even a biographic work, but a book of stories, of anecdotes of the Baal Shem Tov, the closest we can actually get to his real life. Since we don't have a great amount of Baal Shem Tov writings on his own during his lifetime, and the evidence or the things that actually remind him from his lifetime are very little and sporadic. So I am continuing with the next story in this book, and then we'll try to get a little bit into who was the Baal Shem Tov. The story number 11 in the Shibchei Habesht, in this book of literally the praises of the Baal Shem Tov. The brother-in-law of the Baal Shem Tov was Rabbi Gershon of Kitov, who lived in the city of Brod in western Ukraine in the province of Podolia. Brod was a rather important town, and Rabbi Gershon of Kitov came from a line of great Talmidei Chachamim, of great Torah scholars. And I've mentioned before, he looked down upon the Baal Shem Tov, not knowing who his brother-in-law was, and not understanding why his sister would have married someone of such a low level. And in this story, he still was thinking of him as a basically good-for-nothing, poor thing, having pity on him, but also, as well as having kind of shame that his family is falling this low. So the Baal Shem Tov, the first 7 years of his marriage, he spends in a place in the mountains most of the day, or for days at a time. He goes and he goes in his bonenos, in deep meditations. He's having these deep spiritual episodes. And at this time is his sister, who is more or less managing to make a living for the two of them. So after 7 years of this situation, close to the time where the Baal Shem Tov would be revealed as the Baal Shem Tov, he was simply Rabbi Yisrael, the poor husband of Rabbi Gershon's sister. And Rabbi Gershon had them come to his city of Brod and meet with him, Moreinu Harav Gershon. When they came, he asked his sister, Rabbi Gershon asked his sister, how are you? How is life? And she tells him that, I'm going from city to city, have a very difficult life. Everything around us is very difficult, very challenged. And he felt really sorry for them. So he invited them to stay in a place near his house. And he wanted the Baal Shem Tov to come and help him out in business. Maybe he can give his brother-in-law a little bit of a parnas and they'll be better off. So once he tried to give him the job of being a couch driver, balagala, they say in Yiddish, a couch driver. In Hebrew, Baal Hagala, right? The owner of the couch. So he thought the Baal Shem Tov, could be his personal driver, or he could have him basically be like a taxi driver or a driver for hire, and that could be a parnasa in the town of Brod. That's People will pay you for taking them or taking things from place to place. So the Baal Shem Tov took the horses to a lake, but the waters of the lake were full of mud and lime, and the Baal Shem Tov had the horses go into the water. The water was heavy with the mud, and it was not possible to take them out. Rab Gershon saw this and he thought, my brother-in-law, he's, in Yiddish there is an expression, nevach, such a lost case. If I send him to bring people to help me pull those horses out of there, he's going to get lost in his meditations and go somewhere else, and we're going to lose these horses. So he tells him, I'll be back. So he goes to a place nearby to bring people to take to pull the horses out of this mud. And when he's coming back, he sees that the Baal Shem Tov has the clean horses, he has his coach, and he's driving. And he asks him what happened. The Baal Shem Tov says, once it happens to me before that the horses get into the mud, and I just walk out and they come after me. They're all clean, like nothing happened. Anyway, Rav Gershon didn't see anything outstanding out of this thing, and he still thinks, he's not good for this, he's not good for anything. They took a house sort of in the outskirts of the town, in front of the forest, probably kind of to hide them away, not to show them too much. So the Baal Shem Tov would go in the forest and meditate most of the day. And he would have a place in the forest where he would have a mikveh and a place to shower, and he would keep there his white Shabbos clothing. He would wear white in Shabbos. And in Shabbos, he would come home to his wife. There will come guests. She will have to tell, the guests are coming. He will come and take care of them. And they never knew anything about the Baal Shem Tov. He did not yet reveal what was going on. But at the time, they were having a house, they were having guests, and he was wearing white garments in a very fancy way for Shabbos. So there was some appearance of importance, although it was just, as I understand here, Rav Gershon's way to avoid his embarrassment. He's not yet understanding who the Baal Shem Tov was. That's the story. The Baal Shem Tov, Rav Israel ben Eliezer, taught the path of Hasidic Judaism. He started in the first half of the 18th century teaching Pnimius HaTorah, a way of mystical Judaism that uses elements of Kabbalah, but to teach deep secrets and at the same time feel Torah with a special sense, spiritual, intellectual, and deeply emotional. There was a tradition of the Baal Shem, these apparently popular miracle worker Kabbalists, but in reality they were teachers of deep secrets of Torah, and they kept a low profile. They were humble people. They gather in groups of what they was known among them as the Chavraya Kadisha, the Holy Brotherhood, and they would not reveal even their own full identity, as the secrets of the Torah were not yet ready to be revealed by people. To learn Kabbalah, one must be over 40 and have a deep understanding of Torah and things, and to get to the deepest knowledge of Torah was very closely guarded. In as much as people learned some form of popular Kabbalah at the time, this was deeply guarded. The Baal Shem Tov was born, it's always said that he was born in Okup, and there is a place in the Ukraine, in the present-day oblast of Ternopil, the place called Okupi in Russian and Ukrainian is called Okopi Święty Troicy in Polish, but we have a Hasidic tradition and quite a few references that he was not born in that town. Okupi also means in Russian Polish the border or the wall, the division wall. He was most likely born in another place in the region of Podolia. Back then was a frontier land of Poland that had been until the moment occupied by the Turks for quite a few years. The town is called, in Polish, is called Tłuste, T-L with the slash U-S-T-E. In Ukrainian, it's called Tovste or Tovste. And we have many references that Baal Shem Tov was there in his youth, in his childhood, that his mother lived in the town, and she's buried in the Jewish cemetery there, and his father, although we don't know the place of his burial, is most likely also buried there. So the greater region of Podolia belonged at the time to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and he is born in the year of 1698, according to Hasidic tradition, the 18th of Elul, Chai Elul. The significance of the year of 5458, Shanas Nachat. Nachat is the year of happiness, the year of... So, and his name, Israel, they say that when a person faints, to make them come back, you call them by their name. The Jews at the time were in incredible poverty. They had not recovered from what happened 50 years earlier, which was the big pogroms in the time of Khmelnytsky. The way of making a living had been tremendously challenged. Jews at the time of Baal Shem Tov were very poor. They had gone through the great deception of Shabtai Tzvi, the false messiah, and there were wars between the Cossacks and the Poles and the Russians and the Turks, and the Jews were kind of in between this whole thing. And the last thing they were thinking about was their spiritual life. Baal Shem Tov came to wake them up. He lives a tremendous amount of teaching, but mostly or practically all of it in an oral way, what he taught his students. Many great works of Hasidus come from his students, but we don't have a work of Hasidus from the Baal Shem Tov. He was Rav in the town of Mezhibuzh, where he had a shul, a synagogue that was destroyed in World War II and recently rebuilt. And I do have a few stories to tell about just the town of Mezhibuzh, let alone the Baal Shem Tov. And he died the 6th of Sivan, the first day of the holiday of Shavuos, of 5520. That is the 21st of May, 1760, when the area of Podolia was still part of the greater Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which 30-something years later would become part of the Russian Empire, and today is part of the Ukraine. He was married. His first wife was a short-lived marriage. She died at a very young age. The second wife is called Chaya or Hannah, or according to one source, Rochelea. We don't even have the exact name of his wife. This is the wife who is the sister of Rav Gershon of Kitov, and we know of him because he comes from a great family of renowned Torah scholars, so we do have lots of documentation on his case. They have found records of the tax returns that Baal Shem Tov had to fill when he was in Mezhibuzh, so we know his title and his name and the fact that he was living there. And up to World War II, there was the burial place of his mother in Tłuste. The grave of the Baal Shem Tov was preserved through the war and through all the years of communism, and today is like a world ohel, like a world mausoleum. It's a revered place. And we know of the Baal Shem Tov from mainly three works. The one I read from tonight, Shibchi Abesht. We also have the Keser Shem Tov, which I also have. I have a later edition of the teachings that were not compiled there. It's called the Nezer Baal Shem Tov, which I have here, Nezer Shem Tov, which is much later. And then there are the many compilations of his students and the students of his students, as the purpose of Hasidus was to expound and to expand the teachings throughout wherever there were Jews and throughout the world. And so the Hasidim expanded greatly at the time in Eastern Europe, until the time of World War II and the Holocaust, when entire Jewish communities were wiped out. The survivors that had come or came to the United States or went to Israel or other places persevere in the teaching of Hasidus, of which today we have the intellectual part of the movement of followers of the Hasidus, which is Chabad Lubavitch. We have the emotional teachings, what called the Hasidus Chagag, basically the Breslev Hasidim, and we have at least 20 groups from different places in Eastern Europe of the rebels, of the spiritual leaders that survive and continue after the Holocaust. Even though they have become, tremendously diminished by the war, it still is alive. And the idea is to keep learning and teaching and doing what the Baal Shem Tov said, to take out, like Mashiach told him, to take out from the wellsprings of his knowledge to everywhere in the world. So the tradition to teach and to learn about the Baal Shem Tov, Motzei Shabbos, when Shabbos finishes, is a well-established one, and I plan to continue every Motzei Shabbos teaching. I will continue with stories from this book in order, Shivchei Abesht, and I have the idea, if people can help me out, to make a full documentary on the Baal Shem Tov and his teachings, which I have not found something really satisfactory about it online, and I would like to get it done. Those who want to help me, please be in touch with me. We'll come back next week with another story. Shavua Tov, Agut Tevoch.